So, okay, so we looked at the specifications, and the way that it actually works is we don't need to keep track of anything extra, but there's a gap from the left edge, which is about one of these star spacing units over. So that means we're going to skip over 0, and our for loop is going to start at 1. Okay? And each time, we're going to skip over 2 of these little size units, and that's coming from Wikipedia. So in between this little unit here, G is the same as H, right, which is 1/12 of the size of the blue area. We move 1/12 in to get to the first star, and then there's two of those to get to the middle of the second star. So that variable that we have, we call that star H spacing. So we do one of those spaces to get us in the middle of the first star, and then we skip over 2 each time. Right? So this for loop matches that. Then our star center is going to equal column times the star, that variable, that page called H, I called star H spacing. Okay? And the stars, that's the star's center X coordinate. The star also, it has a center Y coordinate, which is going to equal the row times the star vertical spacing. Okay. And the radius of a star, somebody had looked up the star diameter, so the radius of the star is going to be equal to that star diameter, and if you can remember geometry, is the radius is the diameter over 2, just by definition. Okay. Now we're ready to actually draw a circle for the star, and so we say canvas dot draw circle, and it wants the center X, which is star center X. It wants the center Y, which is star center Y, and it wants the radius, which is star radius. We're going to use the same paint that we used before, but we're going to change its color to white before we do this loop. We can actually change its color to white all the way out here before we even begin the loop. So we could say paint.set color to colors, our color dot white. Okay. So that would draw the even rows. The difference between the even and the odd rows is which columns we use. Let's run it now just to see what it looks like on the even rows and make sure that it makes sense. So I'm going to run it. So this is very good, and this is why our mantra is to run it often. You always want to keep compiling it to make sure you don't have errors and you can catch them as soon as they happen. And you want to run it to make sure, or test it to make sure that you haven't introduced bugs as much as you can. And here we see a problem because the stars look like they're in the right columns, but the rows, everything looks shifted up a little bit. So I'm not calculating the Y properly. So if we come over here, this row is starting at 0. Right? We probably want the row to start at 1, right? And go all the way up to, if there's 9 rows, we want 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? So then we want to stop just before we hit row 10. Because you never actually, in a for loop, get to the last. That's not true. In a for loop, you usually don't visit the last number. Okay? So row does not equal 10. This is the condition where you stop. Okay? I could have said the row is less than or equal to 9, but this is the way programmers usually do it. They type in one past the last row they want. So by changing this row to start at 1, I believe I'm going to get the proper positioning of stars. So now the stars are in the right spot, and they appear to be spaced out properly. And the even numbered rows are going to fit in these little gaps in between these ones, right? Okay, or even, odd, it's tricky. Okay, so the odd numbered rows is actually what they are. So we've already drawn the even ones. Now we're going to draw the odd numbered ones, and the difference is those start at column 2. And in fact, I believe that is the only change I'll need to make. Does that make sense why that's the only change? Do you want to make sure it's true first? Let's run it and make sure that that's true. Yes, what's your question?
Why do you have a space between the column, between call and equal sign, but not the equal sign and 2 on line 7?
Spaces don't matter. That has to do with me typing quickly.
I have 15 years to do it.
Or rather, spaces matter in terms of style. But first, right now I'm trying to get it out quickly. So those circles are positioned the way that they should be for an American flag. So I believe we've got everything laid out properly. The only thing is we'd like to use stars instead of circles. And for that, somebody in the class has gone out and put an image of a star up on the class website. So I'm going to just download that star. So this name of this star has a space in it, and spaces in file names will cause a lot of things to break, and as programmers we avoid those things like the plague. Also, we don't like mixed case file names, right? So usually you have file names using the same sort of syntax as identifiers in the language that you're using, okay? Except for all lowercase. Why all lowercase? Different operating systems can't handle case properly. And if you're going to ever move your code from one operating system to the other, it's going to cause you no end of headaches. And why no spaces? Many programmers, many people who are writing programs don't like to deal with spaces because then all of a sudden you need to somehow escape those in the string. And it makes code that deals with file names harder. When you're dealing with an end user, you just got to bite the bullet and do that. But the people that write the Eclipse SDK say, hey, you guys are programmers. It's okay to make your life a little bit difficult. And so we're going to require no spaces. And if you're lucky, eventually they'll fix that. But yes?
Is there any specific place we should save it?
Yeah, so I'm gonna take this thing and I'm pressing Control and C to copy it. And I'm going to my workspace. And I believe that we called this project Drawing. And there's 2 folders. One's called Assets and one called Res. I think you can put it in either spot. I'm going to put it under Res and under Drawings for medium DPI.
I believe the difference between res and assets is just general.
So the file name here, you see how this file name doesn't have a space? Instead they used an underscore. We need to rename this, so I'm pressing S2 and I'm calling it star. And the file name is actually star.png. So we have the star, and we put it under Resources Drawable MDPI. And now we want to load that resource into our app. So I'm in drawing view.java, which has 3 constructors. What I'd like to do is, regardless of which constructor gets called, regardless of how the drawing view is created, I want to load the star resource. So I'm going to make a new function, and I'm going to keep it private, and it has no return type, and I'm just going to call it init for initializing. And I'm going to call that from each one of these constructors. So that way, regardless of which of the constructors is called, And by the way, these three constructors were automatically generated by Eclipse. So regardless of which constructor is called, I'm going to end up in here. And in there, I have the opportunity to load the image from a resource. So yesterday, we actually created our own image, right? Today, we're going to try to load an image from a resource. And you know what? I don't do this often enough to have that memorized. So I use the #1 programmer's tool, and I'm going to go to Google. And when I do that, I find this on some Google page. And it has this accepted answer of bitmapfactory.decode resources. And it looks like it's about right to me. So a bitmap factory. Factory classes are things that create new objects for you. Right? That's just the word for it. I want to decode a resource, so I want to get it from my resources, and this would be the resource ID. So if I go to my code, I'm just going to paste that in there. It's not going to work right off the bat. If I save everything, and if I had cleaned it before I did this, then just because I put that file star, remember I copied the file under the res folder? If I rebuild my project, then it automatically creates r.drawable.star for me as this resource that I can access, an integer. Remember the image was called star.png? The resource is r.drawable.star. Now, that being said, it's complaining about BM. I don't want to call it BM. I want to call this resource star, or this attribute star. And I don't want it to be a local variable, because a local variable wouldn't be accessible outside of the init function. I'd like to be able to access this bitmap from here in OnDraw. So I'm going to look at the quick fix. It says create a field, right? So a field is going to put it up here, right? I want star to be a bitmap. It turned blue because it's happy down here. Now there's another problem, which is Eclipse doesn't know what a bitmap factory is. I want to get the one from android.graphics. Okay. Once I have done those two quick fixes, I have one more problem. It doesn't know what a bitmap is yet, and I want to import that from android.graphics. Okay. Looking pretty. I've just got a warning, which is that star probably needs to be rebuilt. Okay. It's saying star is not used yet. Right. So that was a lot of work we did, but the idea is that we wanted to make sure that before OnDraw is called, that we have loaded this star bitmap. So here in OnDraw, so far we have 2 for loops, and we're drawing circles that are about the right size. Okay. Now, instead of drawing circles, we'd like to draw the star, but we don't know if our star is the right size or not. So before we do anything, let's take that bitmap, which is the star, and we want to resize it so that its width and height are both equal to the star diameter. Right? So we're going to make a smaller bitmap for the star. So I'm going to make a new bitmap, which is a local variable, and I'm going to call it small star. And I'm going to set it equal to, in class bitmap, there's a static function, so I access it with the type name bitmap. And there's all these functions that create bitmaps, and I want to create a smaller version of star. So I'm going to create a scaled bitmap. I want to start with star at its original height, and the new width should be equal to star diameter, but star diameter is a floating point number, right? So I'm going to cast that float to an integer, uh,